Hello, I'm Bruce Lorincz, and this show is called Bruce on the Loose, and that allows me to talk to an array of various people throughout the Wadsworth community. Gabe Tudor is with us today, and he is the Assistant Superintendent for the Wadsworth City Schools. Gabe, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good to be here.
And wondering how long you've been at your current position.
I'm the Assistant Superintendent for the school district, which is kind of a newer position. We kind of transitioned some things when Joe Magnaca retired from a business manager to what we have now. It's my second year in that position. So,
I'm sure you've picked up a few things. What, if you could say three things that you've learned from your tenure so far, what would that be?
The job has a lot of components. Human resources, which is a significant part of my job, has a variety of different components to it, and that our facilities are always an ongoing part of the job that is going to have parts that are reactive and parts that are proactive. So.
You talked for a moment before that it was kind of a hybrid of a couple different jobs. Maybe go in a little more detail on all the responsibilities that you have.
So really my position is really three components. So, school safety, so I head up our school safety initiatives from our drills and equipment and technologies that we put in place to keep our schools as safe as we can. Facilities, now I am very lucky to have good support in our facilities, so I technically do oversee that, but Scott Larch, who I think you had on this show a few weeks ago, really is kind of our point person for facilities, as he kind of is responsible for both custodial and for maintenance. So he manages those two groups of people, who we have some excellent employees in those areas, and then he reports to me and we work through some of those larger things together. So, and then the last part is the human resources, which I would probably say takes up the largest component of the job. And that's kind of at certain times of year specifically. We're always hiring classified or non-teachers, aides, attendants, cafeteria workers. There's usually movement within our classified union and retirements and resignations throughout the year. On the certified side with teachers, that's a little bit more cyclical, obviously, as we hire most of our people in the late spring and early summer for that, and then you don't do that again until the next year. So about ready to ramp up into the certified side of hiring here in the next few months, that's definitely a significant component.
You are fortunate. You mentioned Scott Larch, and we did have him find out all the nuances of his job. Kelly Knapp was also a guest recently with food service and the cafeteria, and I haven't met the new transportation coordinator, Debbie Miller, we had early in September. You would tell us a little bit about the transportation coordinator?
Yes, Mrs. Moats, Erica Moats is her name. It was an excellent hire for us. We're really excited about her. Spent a good majority of her time as a onboard instructor and driver. Was also in union leadership at Cloverleaf Schools, came highly recommended. A few years ago, she moved to Strongsville as the assistant supervisor over there, so kind of transitioned out of more of the into the management side. Did a very good job there and took over for us officially in January, but started working in December with Mrs. Miller, which was a nice transition period, and she's doing a great job for us.
I think that's really important to have, especially people in supervisory roles, to kind of get to know the way of the district and the nuances and the way things are done here in Wadsworth. May be considerably different Cloverleaf and Broadview Heights, and I think that was very wise on your part to have some training period with Debbie.
Yeah, that was something when Debbie had let us know that she was planning on retiring, and we really tried to be as proactive as we could and start that interview process early so that we would have some time. And we were lucky enough to have about 2.5 weeks with Debbie and Erica working together, which was really nice. So.
What about the enrollment for the Wadsworth City Schools? I know you see development happening in all quadrants of the city. What is our enrollment currently? And if you could break down the elementary and then maybe middle school and high school for us.
Yeah, so we, it's interesting. We're the third fastest growing city in Northeast Ohio. And obviously you can see that by our business growth and our continued developments and things like that. From a student enrollment standpoint, we are kind of, leveling off. We actually have had some declining enrollment. Very small, but just a little declining enrollment. We're about 4,500 kids total now, where probably at our height a few years ago, we were about 4,800 kids. We're a little bit, usually between 350 and 400 in each class. Every once in a while you'll get an outlier that's a little higher or a little lower. So if you look through that from an elementary standpoint, we have 5 buildings. So depending on the building you're in, Lincoln and Franklin are a little smaller. So they're in the 250s each, while Overlook, Valley View, and Isham are about 400 each. Overlook a little smaller, but then when you count preschool, they're right there with them. So, and then the intermediate and middle school are a little over 700, and then the high school is about 1,550. As both in 5th grade and in 7th grade and in 9th grade, that's when we see transitions from private school, homeschool. A lot of kids from Sacred Heart will transition over at one of those levels, so we actually see our enrollment grow a little bit. This year we're going to graduate a pretty good number, about 400, which is a little higher than we've had the last few years, and then it'll go back into about the 350s for a few years. So.
What about, you talked a brief time ago about non-certificated. How many and what categories do those fill, and how many people work in those areas? And what about the certified, including the administration?
Yeah, so we have about 285 teachers, and we have almost, we have about 300 non-teaching positions, but some of our employees do more than one position on the non-teaching side. So we have about 250 non-teaching employees, about 25 administrators, and then another about 15 exempt staff. So when you put it all together, we're about 600 employees, plus some substitutes that we hire on our side.
That has to be the largest employer in Wadsworth, wouldn't it be?
I know at one time, I remember when Dr. Fortner was here, I had heard comments that we were. I don't know if we still are, but obviously we are, yes, we do have
one of the top.
One of the larger ones.
What about with that large group of people, and of course now we're in flu season, is kind of the peak, and when I help with student teachers, I always told them, make sure you get your flu shot,
yeah.
Make sure you continue to wash your hands, because you're going to be around students that may be sick, and we don't want you to get sick. And many of them did go ahead and follow through, but substitutes are not an easy issue, because it seems like with unemployment, 3.5% in our country,
yeah.
We probably have a little problem getting adequate subs.
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely you're right on with that, Bruce. So it's a good problem to have, right? We have our economy in America and in Northeast Ohio is doing really well. The only negative of that is that we sometimes that does lead to less people available for temporary work, which is really what substituting is. So we are experiencing a pretty significant shortage of all types of substitutes right now, both certified and classified. Just letting people know in the community if you enjoy working with kids or enjoy maybe either food service or custodial work, we likely have opportunities for you, especially temporary or substitute positions. We're always looking for more. We do our teaching subs through a third party now, Wren Hill. They are still completely vetted through a process, and we obviously get to know them very well, but the actual hiring is through them. and then on the classified side, some of that's done through Wren Hill and some of that's done through us. So if anybody in the community has any interest, I would encourage you to go to our website, click on employment, which is down on the bottom right, and you can, there's a place there to apply for substitute positions and positions within our district, which do open frequently, especially, like I said, on the classified side. So.
It doesn't seem like it's a real difficult process, but you know, people have to be patient and work through that process, and then once you've probably subbed a couple times, it becomes much more easy.
It does, and we find that with our subs that they really start to enjoy it and become comfortable, and you know, we're really thankful for those people in our, that have started subbing and become very reliable for us. As you know, as I would say that, you know, as a teacher sub or really as an aide sub, if you would like to, you could work every day. We have openings pretty much every day somewhere from, you know, obviously illness is high right now. We also do a lot of professional development, so we send our people out to learn new things, and so we have to fill their positions when they're out. And but at the same time, what's nice about that, for some people, they don't want a full-time commitment. So if you don't want to work on a day or you can't work on a day, a substitute has that ability. So.
I imagine then with working with Scott Lorincz, you're probably already thinking about some summer projects around the district, and I, for one, that have a very enthusiastic dog that loves to walk. I appreciate the sidewalks being done last summer at the Parsons administration area, and you'd added parking at Overlook.
Yep.
Parking seems to be an issue at most elementaries, especially at the beginning and ending of day, and if conferences and those types of things, it's really difficult sometimes to find a decent parking. Do you have any big plans this summer, or just kind of sprucing things up?
I would say overall more sprucing up, but some of those become larger. You know, at this point every year we try to allot money every summer for paving and concrete, kind of as almost a preventative maintenance to continue. You know, you don't want to let those areas become too old, or then, you know, sprucing up isn't really a possibility. So as you've noticed the last few years, we've done paving within the district every year. Last year we did the road between the middle school and the high school. We did the administrative parking lot. This year, haven't 100% decided, but we're discussing the student parking lot at the high school. Year before that, you know, we've done some of the elementaries, and then concrete-wise, the same thing. So we plan on doing that. Two larger projects. We've got some. We're going to do some structural maintenance at the bus garage, as the bus garage. Part of the bus garage is not that old. Part of the bus garage goes back 70, 80 years. So we're doing some structural work there just to kind of ensure its integrity long term. And then we, right now, we are out for bid for concrete paving off Grandview Avenue. About a year and a half ago, we purchased a property off Grandview Avenue, right there by the stadium. We demolished the property. The whole purpose of this was to create more parking, and so we are right now out for bid for concrete. Should add 40 plus spaces for you know, for games. It's close to the stadium there. And then the one thing we also kept is we did keep the large barn that was there. We're excited about that. We're doing some renovation of that, and we're going to use that for a lot of our storage of plows, tractor supplies, things like that have currently been stored in other areas. So that's, I guess, again, we've got some projects, nothing extremely significant that is, you know, in the you know, $500,000 plus category, but definitely some costly things that will continue to keep our district running well.
Something you inherited, but you talked about parking at the stadium. It's always been a concern for residents, especially if we have rain. Is there any talk about, you know, and it's wonderful you're adding 40 new spaces. Anything in addition to that to assist with parking?
Good question. You know, some of the area of the stadium parking is actually owned by the city and is part of the city park. And then some of the grass area, this is really what we're talking about in the grass area, is owned by us. You know, there's a couple different things. One, financially, that's a significant decision to pave more of that area. As we know this year, due to rains, most of the games we were not able to park at the stadium, and so we had to bus people there, which has its pros and cons. Some people really like it, some people don't. You know, but you know, so we have considered that, and I think we will continue to. But the two things to factor in there is cost and also green space. You know, I mean, we enjoy, and I know the city enjoys as well, the amount of green space that we have down there at Memorial Park.
Not an easy decision, but something that it seems like if we approach that in a positive way, we can attack that issue.
Yes. Yeah.
What about, speaking of issues, and besides the parking downtown, what about, where are we with CIS?
The board did decide to start the process officially at this point with building a new central intermediate school. And that came after a lot of good groundwork with the CIS committee that met a lot the year before I came, so 2.5 years ago, and then revisited last fall, kind of with some of the updates. So what we had, if you've paid attention to some of the things that we've had in the news, is we had to work through some funding issues with the state, the OFCC, to try to. We wanted to make sure, were we going to get money for the project or not? To be honest, we're still not 100% certain if we're going to get some of the money that we were hoping from the state on that. But what we've decided is we're going to continue to pursue that in case we can, but we don't want to hold off at this point on starting the process of building a new intermediate school. So right now we had a request for proposals for legal services, which is kind of the first step. So you'll probably see in March on the board agenda, we have not determined yet, but someone to recommend for the board to consider for legal services, which would help us start that process of getting an architectural firm in place and moving through the processes. There's a lot of planning before we ever get to the point of starting to talk about dollars and cents and things like that, and just knowing what we need, where it's going to be, what's the building going to look like. It's right now the board very much hopes that the fall of 2025 is when we would be in a new intermediate school.
Well, that's certainly something to look forward to, but it does take considerably time, and certainly it's a major decision with, again, 700 students going there.
Yes.
We don't enter into that lightly, and it's a lot of ramifications, certainly.
Yes.
Another area that you said very, very important to you and to the district is the hiring of new people. Mm-hmm. Could you walk us through the stages that takes and how significant that is?
Yeah, I would say it kind of sounds cliche, but I truly believe it's maybe the most important thing that I do, or that I'm involved in. I do not do it on my own, because the people that work with our young students are so impactful. So it's a very important job. So specifically starting on the certified side, I would say we have one of the better processes in the state. I would say you would summarize it as a 4-step process. We start with, obviously, we post positions in a variety of areas, so we get a lot of people throughout the state interested in our jobs.
Maybe on the state website, on
do
Wadsworth site.
We post on the ODE website.
Okay.
We post on a very common site within the education realm called K-12 Job Spot. We obviously post on our website. And then I attend job fairs as well. Probably the most notable one is called Noted in Akron, which is really for all of Northeast Ohio. We actually hired several teachers from Noted last year, a couple really high quality teachers right out of college that we're really excited about. So we start with, we obviously post the position, we vet them through the application process, and then usually I start with a phone interview. A phone interview is a quick screening that I ask the same questions to every candidate. They're scored on a rubric to try to get us from so, for some jobs, Bruce, we'll have 200-300 applicants. So first you're trying to narrow down to how many do you want to talk to. So we try to make that a reasonable number. And that depends on the job of what that number is. And then from there, the phone screenings hope is that we can move them from that to a more manageable group for what we would consider your traditional table interview. At that time, we always involve a variety of people. Always the principals are involved. Oftentimes we'll have teachers involved at that point. And I'm involved in every interview. But we try to get a lot of different eyes and ears on those candidates. From there, we narrow down to a teaching demonstration, which I think is so valuable and is not that common in Northeast Ohio, where we actually have our candidates teach students, not adults acting like students. During the school year, we actually try to utilize students during, in class. Obviously, in the summer, we'll utilize, kids that will volunteer to do that. Administrator kids get called on a lot to do that. My kids have been students for these teaching candidates a lot. And then from there, we narrow down to 2 to 3 and that meet with Dr. Hill. Always try to send him more than one candidate if at all possible. Whoever we send him, I always tell the whole team that's been involved, we want to be comfortable with whoever we send him that he can pick, and we'll be happy with that choice. So we send those to Dr. Hill. I give him the reference information that I've called on and all the paper, and then he interviews the candidates and selects a candidate from there. So.
If you would send 2 to Dr. Hill for a particular position, would you tell him that our first candidate is, or would you let him make that total decision?
Good question. Dr. Hill does a great job of asking for feedback. At the same time, usually he does that after he's met with the candidates, and it's not so much in who's your first versus second choice as just feedback on the candidates. So a lot of times, Andy will come to me after he meets with those people and talk about, what was the perception of this, from the team, and this, and he'll talk to administrators and even other people on the committee. He does, what I think is neat, and Dr. Fortner did the same thing, is our superintendent meets with every final candidate in this district, whether it is the high school principal or a 2-hour playground aide, to determine if they're a good fit for our district.
We talked about substitutes a few seconds ago, wondering if a substitute that has been really loyal and doing a good job, if they would be in the mix and a possibility. And of course, in the past, working with with student teachers from the Akron University, if they would also be in the mix.
Yes, so great question. Both of those are groups that are obviously looked at. I would say we try to find the best candidates. Now, what's nice is sometimes those best candidates we are able to see in our district, and that is always valuable. So using some examples, I know last year we hired, I can think one right off the top of my head, an intervention specialist who student taught at Franklin. Did an amazing job, subbed for us second semester after she graduated, and is now a intervention specialist for us, doing a great job. So that would be a good example of Akron U. Great example of an excellent teaching candidate that's doing a great job for us. Obviously a lot of people in the community know, Mrs. Titus. We lost Mrs. Titus last year to her battle to cancer. In the spring, Miss Labe came in and subbed for her, did an excellent job, and then through the interview process showed us she was the best candidate, and Mrs. Labe ended up being hired for that position. So that was a good example of a substitute. So yeah, it's definitely, I don't think there's anything that's more proven in how your ability than actually doing it on the job and people being able to see that.
And in knowing again the procedures of Wadsworth, getting along with the staff, I think that certainly bodes well for those people. Seems like they would go in, almost hit the ground running, knowing what's expected of them.
Yes. I think it definitely, they can learn and understand our culture, and get to know our incredible staff sooner, which is a real benefit to them.
Mr. Tudor, what about some challenges? We have just a few seconds left here. What are a couple challenges that you are facing and the district's looking at?
So, you know, school safety is always a primary focus for us. So continuing to determine what we can do to make our school safer every day. So from the drills we run to the conversations we have to the physical things that we put in place, from surveillance and barriers and different things to help, always trying to look at how we can do that better. You know, I would say another challenge that we have is, you know, the continued needs of our students. Specifically, what comes to mind in there would be special education and mental health. Two separate things, but sometimes they go together, sometimes not. Using the example, in special education, our numbers continue to grow. The number of students that we have that are identified with special needs and would be on an individual education plan have doubled in 10 years. At the same time, as you've seen, the Mental Health Committee, which meets regularly, and we have on our board notes as our board members are a part of that as well, we have recognized that the needs of our kids continue to increase. There's more anxiety among our students, there's more depression, and so meeting the needs of our kids proactively is an area that is continuing to be a challenge. So those are two areas of significant growth that we're seeing, and anytime you have that growth, you want to meet those needs well, and so those are areas that we have to continue to focus on.
Well, I thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and enlighten us about all sorts of things within the Wadsworth City Schools. And thank you for viewing, and we'll have a show right around the corner.